Live on Live.
Exactly 1 month ago today, the Paris Talks Forum took place at UNESCO headquarters here in Paris. And the theme of this year's event was the future of conflict, and debates, discussions and workshops were held throughout the day that identified the sources of future troubles and then proposed solutions that best responded to those challenges. And today, I'm joined by Paris Talks founder Michael Bahati and Paris Talks content coordinator Keenya Hofmaier. And we're going to take a look back at this year's event, in which, of course, RFI participated, and we're going to discuss the outcome of the forum. So both Michael and Keenya, you're welcome both back into the studio. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having us,
David. We're here together now for the first time.
To be here.
So we had a very fun day, very stressful day. It was a lot of organisation, I know, on your behalf. We all pitched in for to make the event a success. But Michael, to you first. How did it go for you?
Number one, thank you very much to RFI and to the entire RFI English service for being with us. It was pretty an honor to have you guys on board.
And it was a pleasure to be there. Great people to talk to.
Oh gosh, you people really helped us take it onto another level. Paris Talks started really like a citizen-based kind of initiative, and this year it was even bigger because the stakes were much higher than last year, and next year we're gonna have even a bigger one. So yeah,
fingers crossed. So Keenya, we were all working cheek by jowl that day, but everybody had their own different roles. How did it go for you yourself? There was a lot of logistics in coordinating, well, the topics, but also the people that were talking about those topics.
Yes.
So how did it go?
I think it was a very good success. At the end of the day, I can say that, leading up to it, you always think you're missing something or something's going to go wrong. And I think actually this conference, we might get into the events of the day, but we learned that actually you can't plan everything and the show must go on in more ways than one. One of our speakers even who talked about Brexit, he was changing his subject matter until the day of the conference just because of the nature of the talk. So one thing I really learned is contingency plans are great, but sometimes you just have to keep going and let the show continue. And I think participants were on board with that, and everyone ended up having a great informative conference.
Indeed, going with the flow. But Michael, what about yourself? Would you have done anything differently?
Yes. Space-wise, as we're a citizen-based kind of initiative. We like to do things differently. We did it at UNESCO, and it happened that the venue was not basically kind of a show or theatrical kind of space.
Like in 2018, you did it at one of the theatres there at the Porte Saint-Denis, isn't it?
Yes, the Théâtre de la Porte Saint-Martin.
Saint-Martin, that's it, Saint-Martin.
And it's a theatre with beautiful lighting, but this was a UNESCO auditorium, and logistic-wise, it was pretty tough to put it together. But of course, UNESCO is a beautiful place.
Indeed, it's a very interesting place to work. The architecture there is all protected because it was built back in the 1960s, and it really is like something out of a James Bond, Sean Connery movie. Dr. No. But it's an interesting place. So maybe next year you'll look for another venue, but we'll get to that a little later. Let's talk about the actual event itself. How do you feel, Keenya, that the participants felt that the forum actually went? There was a lot to take in over the course of the day. So how do they feel? What was the feedback you were getting?
There was. Just right from the start, I think participants were face-to-face with the realities of our society and the future of conflict in more ways than one. Unfortunately, on this day, it was the massacre in New Zealand that took place where over 50 people were killed. And also, many people don't know unless you were at our conference, but 5 minutes before we were supposed to start, the entire UNESCO was evacuated, unfortunately, because of a fire situation. So those two instances in and of itself just showed us how things can change in the matter of minutes, in the matter of seconds. That really tied into what we were talking about during the entire conference. So I think from that to the talks from world-class thought leaders and corporations and think tanks about different issues from terrorism to inequality to cybersecurity. security.
Global climate,
Yes.
global warming.
Yeah, they really saw firsthand, either theoretical or on a practical scale, what is taking place here and what we really have to work towards alleviating.
Indeed. Now, let's have a look at, you mentioned there, Michael, some of the themes that came up. There were different threads. There were climate, there was digital age, there were various aspects to the conference over the day. But what do you feel were the themes that kept on coming up, no matter what?
The theme, Keenya worked on the content, but what I felt that kept on coming up was education. How do we bring people together? How do we educate ourselves? But also, how do we educate the future generation
Absolutely.
to tackle upcoming challenges? Education came up from the opening keynote by Lassina Zarbo, to Kyle Matthews, who talked about global terrorism. Yes. And he was like, actually, guys, if we're to face this war of ideas, which terror and terrorism brings, we have to face it through education. Also, Stefania Giannini, who is the assistant secretary, Secretary General of Education at UNESCO, talked about education. And so to me, education was basically like the main message.
Getting the real facts out there, making sure that the people, that education is really at the forefront there. Now, indeed, speaking about these recurring themes, there were lots of workshops that were done throughout the day on the sidelines of the event. Tell us, Keenya, what conclusions came out of those workshops? I mean, which solutions to problems proved to be, let's just say, what ones that you saw seemed to be the most innovative or striking?
Right. Well, as Michael said, one thing that was really interesting was many of the working sessions which we had 6 in total across different themes. Education was at the core of nearly half of them on how we can move towards a greater, more equal, safe, prosperous society. But I think some of the more innovative or unique solutions that came up, one was specifically in the Preventing Terrorism workshop with Kyle Matthews, where participants actually recommended that a global framework and code of conduct be established for the internet across all countries and societies. And I know this is something that has been controversial and actually brought up at the United Nations, but nothing has been put forward. And so I think it's very interesting that the citizens here at Paris Talks even suggested that that's something that should be put in place going forward. Another interesting solution that came up was from cybersecurity standpoint, and saying that it's not just a focus on children that need to be concerned with cybersecurity and the risks, but also parents.
Sure.
And how new cybersecurities bring into question what does consent actually mean for children, for individuals, for romantic partnerships. What is the importance of digital education, with them recommending that digital education take as much importance and clout in school systems as sex education going forward in the 21st century. And there were other ones focused on STEM, for example, that maybe it might not seem so innovative, but I believe it is, and that they thought that STEM, just to refresh the memories of our listeners, STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Yes. So it's not a novel approach. This is something that has always been up to the fore. But what new has come out of that? Something new. I guess a new focus from this group was really the focus on Africa. They saw Africa as the continent of the 21st century and beyond. And their focus was really on, instead of bringing outside technology and people onto the continent, they can use frugal STEM innovations to, again, educate the local populations on the ground with already the scientists and the engineers that are there, in the hopes of building infrastructure and just this educational knowledge that can spur growth, that can spur prosperity throughout the continent, one person at a time, essentially. So I love that solution of kind of handing over the baton one person at a time, taking a village to raise the village, so to speak.
Well, it's back to the old adage, if you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. If you give the man a fishing net, he can feed himself and teach himself. indeed. So it is kind of just bringing it forward, bringing these STEM things forward for the 21st century.
Right.
Now, it was brought up there about the Christchurch massacre. I mean, peace and security in the digital age was a hot topic on that day because of the 50 people who had just been killed that morning in Christchurch, because it was streamed live on Facebook as it happened. And that only came out as we started our day on the 15th of March. Now, in the past month, we have seen the tech giants stepping forward now and admitting that more must be done. They have to do more to ensure that the abuse of their platforms isn't repeated. How do you think, Michael, on the day, the issue was being handled during the discussions? Because it was in everybody's mind.
I mean, do you mean the massacre?
The massacre, but also it was the use of social media and the streaming of it, the technology that was being used, which was meant to be used, was created for benign social networking reasons, and now it was being, the word that kept on coming up was now it was being weaponized.
Right.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, at Paris Talks that day, we were very happy because, well, people were within and outside Paris Talks. I mean, outside UNESCO, people were using the same tools to convey what was happening at the event, and I'm so happy we trended on Twitter that day.
Yeah.
But well, I mean, technology is what it is. I remember. What's his name? Timo Elliott, Vice President SAP, was talking about technology in itself as not a good nor a bad thing.
Right.
It is what it is.
Indeed, that was one thing that I myself that day was kind of feeling a little shaky, and I was kind of making a point that the march, if you will, of technological advances continues regardless. And I was mentioning the advent of 5G technology, but most of the specialists I spoke to were agreed that we shouldn't be scared of the great leaps being made, and this is despite the dangers of weaponization of social media or artificial intelligence. So, in all fairness, that underlines what you said, that you and Paris Talks were using that same technology for the exact positive reason that it was created.
I mean, technology is what it is. So it depends on what you want to use it for. Some people are going to use it because they want to convey a negative or a destructive kind of message. But for Paris Talks, we used it to convey an educational message, a positive message that helps to bring people together and brainstorm on some important and key, topics and issues.
Indeed. Now, one question that comes to mind now is, well, after Paris Talks, it was exactly a month ago, what's the next step? Tell us about, there's a publication of a white paper that is going to be done. So tell us about that first and foremost. What's the next step, and then what is this white paper?
Right. Well, it's currently in construction, but it all started last year at the end of our first conference in 2018, where we really wanted to hone in on our promise of from talks to action. And the way we thought we could do that was by giving participants and global citizens a voice where they normally don't have it on higher platforms and global platforms. So we thought that would come out of a white paper, a sort of civic discourse that we can hand out to different organizations and citizens who are interested. So this year, half of the conference was, of course, the talks that we saw during the day, but the second half was devoted entirely to the working sessions that we just talked about, where in each subgroup, participants were proposed with a challenge and were tasked with coming up solutions with those challenges. And what we've done so far is kind of combine the challenges and recommendations that came up during those working sessions to produce what is looking like it's going to be a 20-page white paper for publication in May that we hope will spur at least further debate and at most real policy and societal change in different parts of the world. This will be a free publication for think tanks and policy organizations that are interested, and we really hope to get the voices of all the participants out there.
So you have great expectations, Michael. Is that the right way to put it?
Well,
what are your expectations?
Our expectations are pretty simple. We just want to make sure that everyone, well, every participant at Paris Talks gets access to what they did, contributing to this work. The other expectation is that we hope that what we created, what we put together, is going to help whoever wants to get some resources and some innovative ideas out there.
And now to wrap up, what about Paris Talks 2020? Any thoughts on next year's event? I know this year's event is still very fresh in your mind, but have you moved on? I don't know, Keenya first. You see that you're doing all the content. You're cramming it all in.
Well, we've definitely already started working on 2020, and we ended the conference. It was a long day, so some people might have left before our announcement, but we ended with the big announcement that moving forward, Paris Talks will no longer exist. But it's not something to be sad about. Actually, the new platform will be called City Talks.
City Talks.
City Talks, yes.
And so therein lies the clue. so what is?
Well,
do you know what city Paris Talks might take place in?
Well, basically, Paris Talks will no longer exist in its
current form.
Its current form. It's going to remain as a small, very small mini event. It will serve as a think tank and incubator. Ideas coming from Paris Talks will be helping to nurture City Talks. City Talks, which is going to be a bigger platform.
So it's basically you're going to be expanding.
That's right.
Expanding,
right.
Yes.
Next year, of course, in March, we're going to have a City Talks Global Summit in Paris. And then we're also going to go to Africa and to America.
Excellent. And all I can say is best of luck to both of you. And hopefully RFI will be following you on that journey.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Welcome.
Michael Bahati and Keenya Hofmaier.
Thank you.
Thank you.